While that loads, let me begin. Okay, so we can begin with some of Rawls's basic ideas, his fundamental ideas concerning a theory of justice. One of them is that society, he understands society as a fair system, or a just society as a fair system of cooperation and not necessarily of competition, but any society must, in order for a society to exist, it must involve cooperation among its people, its citizens, and that system of cooperation should be regulated by fair terms of cooperation, and that a well-ordered society, a just society, is one that's effectively regulated by a public conception of justice. So he sees society as being a system of cooperation, and a just society as one that's governed, regulated by a set of principles of justice. And that raises the question: what should those principles of justice be? The main focus of justice, the subject of justice for Rawls and for many others, is the system of main political and social institutions are the subject of justice, and he calls that the basic structure of society. The basic institutional structure of society is the main subject of justice. That's where the principles of justice are focused, in how our basic institutions function and how fair and just they are. Basic institutions include the government, the economy, uh, public educational system, among other, the legal system, the justice system, criminal and civil justice system, etc. So the subject of justice is the functioning of social institutions. How well and how fairly do institutions function? A fourth idea is the original position, and that's a thought device that models agreement under fair conditions, and that speaks to how Rawls goes about justifying, providing reasons that support the validity of his principles of justice. A fifth, a very important idea is that he conceives citizens as free and equal persons, um, and that's a basic assumption of of Rawls's theory, that we assume, we presuppose that we as citizens, you and I, should be and are conceived as both free and equal persons, and that we have two moral powers that we possess, which makes us free and equal. And those two moral powers are rationality and reasonableness. Rationality refers to a capacity uh, to be able to define our own good, to define our own interest, and to identify the means that are necessary for fulfilling our interests. That is, as a free and equal person, each one of us has the power, the capacity to freely decide and pursue our own conception of the good life. And secondly, we also are bestowed with the power of reasonableness. That is, we assume that we have a sense of justice, that we're capable of responding and considering responding to and considering the interests of others, and that we take into consideration in the pursuit of our interests, we take into consideration the interests of others in a moral sense, that we restrict the pursuit of our own good uh, when it is potentially or does interfere with the good of others. We'll talk more about that. And then sixth, any theory of justice, any principles of justice that are to regulate the society um, are to be, they need a justification. They need public reasons that support their validity. And that's where the original position comes into play, as we'll see. One final note with these fundamental ideas is that I'm reminded of a parable that is two fish are swimming in the ocean. One older grandpa fish and his grandson are swimming in the ocean, and the grandpa asks the grandson, "How's the water today?" And the grandson fish responds, "What water? What is water?" Uh, Indicating that uh, the grandson fish, the younger fish, isn't aware at all of the medium through which he exists. And this is that medium for us is the basic structure of society that normally we're not aware of, really. But it is the water within which we swim, and it determines the basic structure of society, how its institutions function, really define and limit the possibilities of our own life, good or bad. And so, since we're swimming in that water should be conducive to our interests, to our well-being as free and equal persons. So let's turn to the principles of justice. And as we'll see, there are two principles, but they are framed for a democratic society. So that's the social context in which Rawls is thinking about justice, is that he's seeking principles um, that will be applied or um, be employed in a democratic society, and will define what a democratic society is from the point of view of justice. As suggested, the basic subject of justice is the institutional structure of society, and that justice is fairness. Rawls's theory of justice is a form of political liberalism, uh, and it asks what principles of justice are most appropriate to specify our basic rights and liberties, and also to regulate the social economic inequalities in our life prospects. So turning to the two principles, the first principles of justice that Rawls argues for is that each person has the same indefeasible claim to a fully adequate scheme of equal basic liberties for all. So the first principle of justice that Rawls asserts and argues for is that each person has a justifiable claim to a scheme of liberties, of equal basic liberties, and liberties include various rights, a right to freedom of conscience, that is to decide one's own philosophy or religious point of view, a right to freedom of expression, a right to freedom of movement, freedom of association, choosing who we associate with, that is who our friends are, who we might marry, what clubs and organizations we might want to join. We should be free to associate on an equal basis with others. And that includes forming political organizations and engage in political action. Uh, Also, a right to political participation, which is sometimes refers to as self-determination. That is the right to vote, the right to serve on juries, the right to petition and the government, the right to press claims against the government, the right to dissent even from what we uh, believe is unjust practices of the government, etc. So, and also equal right to define and pursue our own conception of the good life. Uh, so the first principle of justice has to do with a scheme that we're entitled to and justified in claiming a wide array of liberties, and this speaks to our freedom as persons. The second principle is stated as social and economic inequalities are to satisfy two conditions. First, they are to be attached to offices and positions open to all under conditions of fair equality of opportunity. And second, they are to be the greatest benefit of the least advantaged members of society. And that second condition is what Rawls refers to as the difference principle. So this second principle has to do with inequality. If we're free and equal persons, if everyone is equal, then does that demand a numerical equality in terms of the distribution of rewards, opportunities, wealth, etc., in the society? Rawls argues that a strict equality would in itself be unfair, that some inequalities are justifiable um, based upon persons' motivation and also their talent and their free choice that will generate inequalities. But the question from the point of view of justice is, are those inequalities justifiable, and on what grounds would an inequality in income or an inequality in opportunity be justifiable, would be valid? And so he specifies two conditions. First of all, any inequality must be generated from the condition of fair equality of opportunity. That is, we're not going to guarantee results, but we should guarantee everyone the opportunity to succeed in society. And fair means here that each person would have an equal chance, depending upon their talent and their ambition, to achieve what they set out to achieve. So and that would be the distribution of wealth, of jobs, of positions of authority would not be determined by one's social class, one's race, one's religion, one's ethnicity, or one's gender. That everyone would have a fair shot at success. And secondly, inequalities are only justifiable if they are to the benefit of the least advantaged members of society. That an inequality must, in order for it to be justifiable, must benefit those who are least advantaged. And Rawls' least advantage in terms of one's economic standing in the society related to one's natural abilities, etc. So inequality, social and economic inequality, must satisfy these two conditions of fair equality of opportunity. And secondly, they must be to the benefit of the least advantaged members of society. So those are the two principles of justice that Rawls advocates for. The first principle establishes a just constitutional regime in the sense of providing a scheme of liberties, a Bill of Rights, if you will. And the second principle, very importantly, provides the background institutions with the rules for social and economic justice. The basic aims of liberty are to develop, give us an opportunity to develop and exercise our two moral powers, that is, our capacity for rationality and for being reasonable, for our sense of justice, which Rawls sees as the most important interests that we have, our highest order interest. And secondly, that through guaranteeing rights to liberty, that we will engage, each person in the society would engage in social cooperation on a footing of equal respect. So liberty provides us with the social basis, the political basis for self-respect and for being respected equally as a citizen. The aims of the second principle are fundamentally to guarantee the fair value of liberty, as well as to guarantee the social basis of self-respect. It seeks to prevent political resentment and withdraw from society and from its political system, thereby securing political stability. The fair value of liberty is very important here. It's an attempt to specify rules or principles that would guide the distribution of social goods, wealth, education, healthcare, etc., in a way that assures the value of our individual freedom. If we just stopped with the basic rights, those rights can be hollow, as we all know. If we don't have enough education, if we were denied an educational opportunity, if we're denied equal health care, if we're homeless, if we're impoverished, if we don't have enough money to survive, then what good are those rights to liberty? You see, ID. They become hollow. They become only paper rights. So the second principle is an attempt to ensure that liberty has value by providing basic goods, primary goods of income, of wealth, of opportunity, of education, of healthcare to every citizen in order to ensure the fair value of liberty. Let me move forward here. To the original position. Can you still hear me? So the original. Okay. So let's turn to the original position, and then after that we can, if you have any questions, we can happy to entertain those. I know we're covering this very quickly. It's somewhat complicated, but hopefully we're getting a basic idea of what Rawls was proposing. So the question is, how can we, what reasons can we offer, and what would count as reasons that would justify those principles of justice, or any other principle of justice we would propose uh, to regulate the basic structure of society. Um, so the original position is a device that Rawls invented in order to illustrate the basic process or procedure through which we can justify, that is, give reasons for why we should accept these principles of justice. And rather famously, Rawls, in the original position, appeals to the idea of fairness as the basic reasons that would justify our principles of justice. So the original position models tended to model fair conditions under which agreement can be reached. Um, so the original position is a situation, a hypothetical situation, wherein a group of people that are representatives of a large social group would meet to deliberate and to decide on and agree to principles of justice that would govern their society. So we're kind of starting from scratch. And here in the original position, Rawls is appealing to what has been known as the social contract tradition. And just as if you're signing a contract with someone, let's say you're taking out a loan to buy a car, you sign a contract that you will meet the payments of the loan, and that a bank will give you the money up front to pay for the car under certain conditions, that you will repay the loan in a timely fashion as scheduled by the details of the contract. But so if you agree to that contract, then you're obligated to meet its terms, and you get the rewards of the contract as well by meeting the terms. But the contract is only, as you know, is only valid if you can enter into that contract fairly. That is, you're not coerced or forced or manipulated or deceived into signing the contract. That the agreement that you enter into is a fair agreement in the sense that it has been entered into under conditions that are fair. So Rawls uses that idea of a fair contract to justify the notions, to justify the principles of justice, and sets up a thought experiment, which he calls the original position, that illustrates or models that kind of agreement. And so he brings representatives of the society together. Their task is to decide on, to agree to principles of justice, and he arranges the conditions under which they're going to debate and agree to in terms of fairness, that the conditions would model the idea of fairness. And so fairness includes equality, that each of the representatives have equal standing, they have equal power, no one's in a position of superiority or inferiority, everyone is in a position of equality and they have equal rights to participate in the deliberation. So each member of the original, each party to the original position has equal standing. And that mirrors, that models our conception of the person as being equal. Secondly, he invokes as a principle of fairness, invokes the idea of impartiality, that the parties to the original position should be impartial. That is, they shouldn't be biased in favor of their own interests. Although he sees them as being rational and making a rational choice of principles in terms of their own interests, he sets up the conditions such that they will exercise their rational choice in an impartial way. And how he does that is he employs a device called the veil of ignorance. So the participants are to be placed under a veil, a shroud of ignorance. That is, each party does not know, has no knowledge of who they're going to be in the society. They don't know what their social class will be. They don't know what their gender will be. They don't know their race. They don't know their religion. They don't know anything about how their abilities or talents. Um, so they're placed under this veil of ignorance, and that models what impartiality is. So that when they choose principles of justice, they will choose them in a fair way, not influenced by their own interests. Um, and so, being equal and impartial under a veil of ignorance, they enter into a discussion, a conversation, and a debate about which principles of justice they will support. Um, and Rawls argues that under these conditions, uh, the parties to the original position will choose the two principles of justice as the most fair principles of justice, that they would rationally agree to a society that guaranteed basic equal liberties, as well as the fair value of those liberties in terms of a distribution of social goods that doesn't create gross inequalities, social inequalities. Um, So this is what Rawls referred to as pure procedural justice, that whatever we agree to, whatever the outcome of this deliberation would be, that would be acceptable, that would be justifiable because it has emerged out of a mutual agreement under fair conditions. So for Rawls, what is just is that which we can agree to under fair conditions. And he argues that what we would agree to, what is most rational for us to agree to under fair conditions, are the two principles of justice. So the original position is a method of justification that is employed to justify the validity of the principles of justice. There's a lot more to say, but I think that gives you an idea of the two main ideas that of Rawls's theory of justice: his advocacy for the specification of the principles of justice, and his method of justifying those principles. So I'll stop here, and we can take some questions.